What's good, guys? Fantasy Joe back here with my 2024 running back draft rankings. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. If you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment section down below. Drop a ton of these videos after the draft. Going to be shooting out my real running back fantasy rankings and my real wide receiver rankings. Wide receiver is already out in the channel, so make sure you guys check that video out. But going to be dropping the updated ones, especially for running backs. The main difference is going to be their landing spots. Whoever goes to the Cowboys, the Bengals, some other locations that are still prime looking for a running back are going to be able to hit the ground running. And the draft capital is also going to make a big difference. At number 1, I have Jonathan Brooks. Now, Brooks was really good at Texas his last year. Unfortunately for him, suffered a torn ACL about halfway through the year. Or not halfway, but he was able to play a decent chunk of games. So you see 10 games, 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns, 25 receptions, a really good number there on the average per catch. He's also only 20 years old. Honestly, just a very well-rounded game to me. Could kind of do everything. He's got good size. We obviously didn't see him test at the combine, but I think he had just really good film. Didn't really leave me wanting anything. Maybe if I saw something, he doesn't have like crazy breakaway speed, but he seemed plenty fast enough to me. I guess he would have been the 4.4s for running. And yeah, that's a great time. Tony Pollard's a pretty good pro comp for me, athleticism wise as well. Obviously, they don't know a whole ton about his numbers and things like that. And I expect he should be ready to rock and roll fairly early in the NFL season. But if I was an NFL team or a fantasy team, I think talent-wise, he's the best draft. He's the best back in the draft. Moving on to number 2. This one, there's a lot of, honestly, this is a really rough running back class. But the thing I will say is there's a lot of potential still. Let's look at this next guy. Jaylen Wright is who I have at 2. Wright is just an athletic freak. Look at these test scores. 98th percentile. He weighed 210 pounds. That's a good weight to be running 4.38. You can see as well why his speed score is so high because of his weight. The burst score is nice as well, which I really like. And we can roll down here. You see this 95th percentile in college yards per carry. That's a big-time number I like to see. And you can see his last 2 years, 146 carries, 875 yards. His last year, 137 for 1,013. Caught the ball a little bit. Not great numbers in that department, but maybe he can improve. He had a few catches last year that were pretty impressive, but yeah, like I said, just not a whole lot to go around in that pass catching department. But he's a running back who's extremely explosive. He's also crushed the broad jump and vertical. If you've got a really good 40 time, a great broad jump, and a vertical, you are just extremely explosive. Like I feel like if you check all 3 of those at running backs, I really write off a lot of the questions I have. And like, vision, I think, is a concern for Wright. But when you have so few carries in college and you're this explosive, I think it's like you side on the side of let me get this guy more work, see if he can get better, and then, believe in those type of tools. Next up, this might be a surprise. He's this low. I don't think so, though. Trey Benson from Florida State. He's a good back. And another guy who meets this, he's over 210. He's got the 4.39, 97th percentile, as you can see. Even better speed score, worse burst score. His 10-yard start was a little rough. That's why his burst score is so low, which is a bit concerning. It takes you a while to get to the top speed as a running back. You might not get there all that often. But you see the last 2 years, fairly identical except in the touchdown department. More pass catching this last year as well. The pass catching numbers give me a lot of hope for Trey Benson. If he can continue, to catch the ball with these measurables, he should be good. And honestly, his film looked good. I think I would just like to see him run with a little bit more violence. Maybe that's what I thought when J.K. Dobbins was coming out of school. J.K. Dobbins ran with the force and inflicted pain. But yeah, I don't really see that as much with Trey Benson, but he is no doubt a home run hitter. Just that the slower burst score scares me off a little bit. That's why I ultimately put Jaylen Wright ahead of him. When you add in, some of those combine numbers, that was the differentiator for me. Okay, so this next player might be another one who's a bit of a surprise. MarShawn Lloyd from USC. This is a guy, I'm watching all these guys trying to decide what ranking order I was going to put him in. Like I said, this is an underwhelming RB class, so it was a little tougher. This guy immediately jumped out to me. Honestly, gosh, I might even take him ahead of a Trey Benson if I'm being honest. So if you're going to talk about just being a running back, this guy's film is really nice. He's got great agility. He didn't test, but the way you can see him just move around the field effortlessly at 5'9", 220 is really good to see. He's also a really good pass catcher, and a 4.46 at 220 is no slouch. You see 87% in there, 93. Speed score just basically adds in your weight as a component, so that's why it's better. Burst score wasn't crazy, but if we scroll down here, you can see the last 2 years, 18 for 176, 13 for 232. He's not only having catches, but he's doing damage in the receiving game. That's something you want to see. Only 116 carries, but average over 7 yards a carry this last season. That's what you love to see. I think if USC was a little bit better of a team, this guy would be a much higher drafted player. But I still think this is a guy that can come in the NFL level and compete right away. If this guy went to the Cowboys, I think he would be a massive stud for fantasy football and a first-round draft pick in your rookie drafts based off his talent. And you can see DeAndre Swift here, but he's 220. Like, that's the number. It's just really encouraging to me. All right. This next guy up, another guy who might be a bit of a surprise. I think there's one name people are expecting to see here, Audric Estime. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that close to right. I know it's, okay. Let's take a look at this guy's numbers. And he's not the most impressive. As you can see, 17th percentile in the 40. We talk about 5'11", 221. That's what makes MarShawn Lloyd's height, or his weight and height, so impressive, is where you look at how explosive he is compared to a guy like Estime at a similar, weight and even taller. But he was very good, and the burst score is solid, so that's something. He's a strong cat. Good yards per carry, though, in college. That's, I think, the number that came down to me. It's like, look at his production. 1,341 rushing yards this last year, 18 tuds, caught 17 balls. Not necessarily his forte, as you can see, not great efficiency numbers in that department, but that's not really what he's going to be asked to do in the NFL. He's going to be asked to get the ball and run downhill. As you can see, this is, I think, a pretty good comp. He's more of a Jordan Howard type. He's not going to be the guy who goes out there and catches 40 passes in a year, but he could go out there, he can catch 10, and he could run for 1,000 if you give him the ball enough. I think he's the guy who's going to be, drafted higher than people think. He'll fall because of his measurables, no doubt. I think he'll be picked between the 3rd and 5th round. But I do think the talent is really good, and you can see the age is 20.6, which was definitely a factor to me on some of these backs when we were ranking them. So, speaking of that factor, let's move on to our next back. Blake Corum, the national champion from Michigan. I have behind Estime, and honestly, it's like, this one is tough because the film I thought was fairly similar for both these players, but then you add in the fact to me that he's 23 and a half years old. I think that's the biggest knock that I have on Blake Corum, honestly. It's just, am I going to spend a rookie draft on a guy that's 3 years older at the running back position, has a lot more wear in his tires, has an ACL tear already? That's not the scariest thing to me, but it's just the age added in with the injuries. And, like, look at this. For a 205-pound back, a 4.5 is pretty good. Like, I was happy with that number for him because he's more of an agile, strong power back. But you just look at the yards per carry this last year, like 4.8. That'd be a great number if he was playing in the NFL, but he was playing at Michigan, the best team in college football last year. And he put up those numbers. Like I said, he is coming off that ACL injury this last year. These numbers were better on the yards per carry number, all those things. They had 27 touchdowns, I believe, total. 26 total. I didn't know they were counting in the passing as well there. But as you can see, these athleticism scores just aren't great. And then you add in the fact that he's already older. The tape, honestly, is good to me. Like, I like the tape, and I wasn't scared by that 40 time. I think it's most of the other factors when you add them in. It's just the age, the injuries, and just being able to pick a running back that has, potentially 3 years more shelf life onto your fantasy football team. I'm probably going to end up doing that. And it's convenient. We go from this guy to this guy. Braelon Allen at number 7. Talk about young. He is going to be probably the youngest player on his NFL team for a whole year. I mean, I guess that's normally how it works out. But so he didn't have many testing numbers, but you can see here 6'1", 235. He is a really big back, and he's 20 years old. I almost put him ahead of Corum, and I wouldn't fault anybody for drafting Braelon Allen ahead of Corum because, like I said, you're going to get a lot more years out of this back. When he played at the beginning, I think he was 17 in this year in 2021. Had 1,200 rushing yards at 17 years old. That's phenomenal. This last year in 2022, more of his, one of his better years. And then they switched the schemes coming into 2023. So I watched a lot of the 2022 tape. Oh, as you can see over here, 17 years old at that age, and put up those type of numbers. Very impressive. I will say this though, you don't have, he's a big back, but you don't have the speed scores and things like that. His tape didn't impress me a ton. He's got nice cutbacks every now and then, but he really doesn't run like a back of his size should. But I still believe in him just because he's so young. He's got so many physical tools. You think you put him in an NFL offense, he can figure it out over time. So I do have some belief in Braelon Allen, and I think this team will invest a decent draft pick into him. Another thing to throw out here, a lot of people compare him to A.J. Dillon. Some of these bigger backs. A.J. Dillon was 6 foot flat, 250. So some of the concerns that Dillon ran into with change of direction, things like that, I already think Braelon Allen can be better at some of those things just because he's a little bit of a smaller back to begin with. 6 foot 250 is just massive for a running back. 6'1", 235. Saquon, I believe, is right around 5'11", 6 foot, and he's 233. We'll look up his combine. And we'll find out. 6 foot 233. So fairly similar size to him when you look at it. All right, next up, Isaac Guerendo. Again, I have no idea if I'm saying his name right. It's hard to know how people say them. Okay, this is another guy who had a very good combine performance. As you can see, all these numbers just jumping off the screen. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets drafted in front of a bunch of these other guys. And you can see the age. He's just so young. Hasn't even turned one yet. No, that's a joke, obviously. But I do think at that height, so he's 221 pounds, 4'3", 100th percentile. He's literally the top guy. I've never seen 125.7. That burst score's out of this world. The agility score is good. All these numbers are good. You scroll on here, 810 yards this last year. Why did he only have 132 carries and 64 the year before? Excellent question. But he is the best athlete in the class. I think he's a good bet to be drafted. Like, somebody's going to make a project out of this kid. All the reasons I named are why I like Jaylen Wright as well. More reasons like Isaac Guerendo. He's caught the ball a little bit too. You like to see that. I might even put this guy ahead of some of these other players. Just those numbers are so ridiculous at the running back position. You usually bet on athleticism. That's just about the number one factor. But it doesn't, you have to have vision and other things as well. But he should be a really, really exciting project for whoever gets him in the NFL. Next up, we've got Dillon Johnson. I guess I should put him down here. Dillon Johnson, running back from Washington, national champion runner-up. The numbers aren't good, but this is one of the few backs in the combine that I thought ran angry. I thought he just ran like every run was his last. 233 carries last year for 1,200 yards. That's a great number. Caught 24 passes. Not super efficient in that department, but as you can see in some of these previous years, that's going to be big for him, just the fact that he's had so many. And he's 22 years old. Not the end of the world. You usually do look for running backs to leave about a year early. There's a better, correlation rate with stuff. Honestly, receiver, pretty much everybody. There's a reason you're leaving school early is usually the case. But Dillon Johnson, not the best numbers by any means. Liked his film. This is a guy who knows where he'll be drafted. Like I said, a lot of this will just depend. If Jonathan Brooks gets taken by the Cowboys, then all of a sudden, you're slotting him. But if it's Isaac Guerendo, then you're drafting him, as a top 3 back in this class. So, like I said, so much of it will depend on the thing. I doubt Isaac Guerendo gets drafted that high, but he might go to a good landing spot. But I do think when you talk about Lloyd, Trey, Benson, Jaylen Wright, Jonathan Brooks, these 4 players here at the top in this tier, wherever the best landing spot is, will probably be my favorite back out of all these guys. If Blake Corum goes somewhere too, that's a good landing spot. He'll be in redraft next year. He'll be a smash hit. He's not too old now. It's just more of my dynasty outlook on him, why he's sliding down this list. Number 10, we have Ray Davis, running back from Kentucky. Davis, I really liked his film. I thought he was a good player. Agile, he's a little bit on the older side as well. That's another reason he slid down this list. 5'8", 211, stocky dude. 4.52 isn't bad. Speed score, none of these numbers are bad. I think it's just when you add in age, not insane athleticism numbers. Solid production, 2 years, 1,000 yards. That's what you're 20 touchdowns. There's usually a correlation too between touchdown scores in the college and success in the NFL, so that's something to consider. The reception numbers, I'll say, in this year are fantastic. That's what you're looking for, much better than the years at Vandy and Temple. Um, but he's still, I thought, like his film looked good. It's more just the age, and then the combine numbers not blasting off the screen. That's why I think like a guy like Isaac Gorendo, I think he'll get picked ahead of a guy like Ray Davis, who even produced at a much higher level for multiple years. But he's, like I said, older, not as explosive. Teams will take the shot on the more explosive guy and the younger guy usually. So let's just look over the list. So I would say these top four are in a tier of their own. Say my next tier is probably this next four: Blake Corum to Gorendo, and then my third tier. So let's just there's a tier, and there's my tier. So tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And like I said, I'll come out with a video after this showing where my draft rankings are for all these guys. I'll do a running back video. I'll probably just do actually a video overall where I just show my first 2 or 3 rounds of rookie draft rankings. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and check that video out. Make sure you check out the wide receiver video I already did, ranking Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, all those guys. Some surprises over there, so you'll want to check it out. Get ready for this draft. Be able to hit the ground running and dominate your friends and family in fantasy football. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and if you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment section down below. Or respond as always. This has been Fantasy Joe. Thank you guys for watching.